Number 10. Missing time. When it comes to real-life glitches, a common one you might experience is missing time, and a classic example is called highway hypnosis. This is when drivers suddenly appear to lose a chunk of time as if their brain just slipped into autopilot mode, usually on long and monotonous roads. So sure, this one is easy to understand. The scenery doesn't change, the engine hums soothingly, and the white lines on the road become hypnotic. But what about those times it happens when you're not driving? Like, for example, you're just sitting at home and you glance at the clock, and then you glance back up moments later to see that 20 minutes have passed? Is this just from being tired or stressed out, or is it something else going on? Then there are those times when people seem to skip a few frames like they're in some kind of grainy CCTV footage. 1 minute they're on one side of the room and the next they're on the other, and they have no recollection of how they got there. So what's happening here? Is the brain working on autopilot again? Is it down to tiredness and microsleeps? Or is it down to something more sinister? Sometimes people report seeing lights before time slips happen. Is this evidence for alien abductions? Or perhaps we're living in a simulation and this happens when it bugs, causing us to skip forward a few frames. Number 9. Time slips. If you think missing time is weird, then the next one will really freak you out because not only can we lose time, but sometimes we can also step back into another time altogether. One of the most famous examples occurred high in the Andes Mountains on the Marcoasi Plateau. Located about 40 miles east of Lima and almost 13,000 feet above sea level, the area is famous for the giant human and animal-like figures found there. They were supposedly created through erosion, but many visitors find them too uncannily real for them to be natural. Some believe they were carved by a lost pre-Incan people, and lots of paranormal activity like the presence of shadowy beings and the sensation of being watched have also been reported in the area. And the time slip event that occurred up there certainly falls into this category. One day, a group of friends were hiking in the area when they came across a strange hut that didn't look like it belonged. As they approached it, they saw the windows were glowing faintly, and inside, they could see people dressed in clothing from 200 years ago. Transfixed, one hiker tried to step into the hut, but she suddenly froze before her friends pulled her back. After they grabbed her, they found that the half of her body that had crossed the threshold was paralyzed, and she remained paralyzed for the rest of her life. Had she inadvertently stepped across into another dimension? Was half of her lost in another time when her friends tried to save her? Was the area protected by ancient spirits? Or did the group suffer from a collective hallucination due to high altitude or the electromagnetic anomalies commonly experienced in the area? Nobody knows. And then there's the case of the Kendal car crash. Back in 1979 in Kendal, a small town in the UK, a lady was out driving alone when she crashed her car. She wasn't badly hurt, but then suddenly, a man appeared and helped her out of the car before disappearing without a trace.
Are you okay? Let me help you out of there. I think your horses must have bolted.
Oh, thank you. Wait, what?
But it gets weirder. She said the man had been wearing strange clothes from the past, and police later found there was no record of such a man in the area. And then the woman realized something else. Although the crash was minor, and the whole thing had only taken a few minutes, it later turned out she had lost several hours. Had she traveled back in time? Was she helped by a man from the past? Or did she just imagine the whole thing, having been more shaken up by the crash than she realized? Number 8. Deja vu. Number 8. Deja vu. Number 8. Deja vu. Deja vu is French for already seen, and it's the unshakable feeling we sometimes get that we've lived through something before. It's probably the most famous glitch there is, and also one you've probably experienced yourself. Nobody really knows why it happens, but of course science has some theories. Some people believe it's down to a memory processing malfunction where your brain momentarily glitches and tells you that something new is actually something you've seen before. Alternatively, there's the fuzzy trace theory that says memories are stored as general impressions instead of fully HD videos of past events in your head. This means events similar enough to old memories may trigger deja vu. Or there's the dual processing hypothesis. Because your brain has separate systems for processing new info and accessing past memories, if the two drop out of sync, something you're seeing for the first time can feel like an old memory. Sounds reasonable. But there are other ideas too. Some think deja vu is proof of past lives and it happens when you relive memories from a previous incarnation. Or perhaps deja vu is when our simulated reality glitches or when something gets changed. Yep, just like in The Matrix. But perhaps the most intriguing answer is the multiverse theory. According to this idea, our universe is just one of an infinite number of others, and when we experience déjà vu, it represents our consciousness slipping from our universe to another where we literally have lived the same experience before. You might prefer the science explanations, but what about those times when déjà vu is so intense that people predict what's about to happen and then it does? That's not just a brain burp, is it? So maybe the multiverse could actually be a thing. Number 7, the Capras Illusion. It's understandable that you'd be a bit freaked out if a random stranger from the past appeared to help you. But what about if you suddenly started believing that your loved ones had been replaced by identical imposters? Well, that's exactly what it feels like to have Capgras syndrome. It's not common, but there have been several cases, including a woman who thought her husband was an imposter sleeping in her bed, a man who thought his mother was a fake, and even a man who thought his house was a replica. And how does this occur? When you see someone's face, two things happen. Your temporal lobe causes you to recognize the face, and your limbic system then adds an emotional response. But when the connection between the two is damaged, you recognize the face but have no emotional response, and your brain then responds by telling you the person you're seeing is an imposter. Or at least that's the most common theory. But what if it's not? Maybe the loved one really has been replaced, and maybe the person really can tell that it's a fake. But then who or what are the replacements? And more importantly, who put them there? And what happened to the people they've replaced? Number 6, the Fragali Delusion. A similar but even stranger condition is the Fragali Delusion, named after Leopoldo Fragali. He was an actor famous for changing costume rapidly to portray different characters on stage, and this tells you what the condition involves, because people suffering from it believe that all the people around them are actually a single person, disguised as everyone they meet. Again, the scientific explanation is connected to misfiring facial recognition with the brain connecting different faces to one individual. But what if the sufferers are actually right, and multiple people really are all the same person, perhaps sent to follow them and keep an eye on them? Imagine how terrifying this would feel, and then imagine how much more terrifying it would be if it were actually true. Number 5, Doppelgangers. Another glitch that's related to the Capgras and Fragali delusions is another of the most famous. And it's also possibly the scariest because this time, you can't fall back on some kind of comforting scientific explanation. Here, it's 100% just weird paranormal freakery. The idea of doppelgangers has been around for centuries and occurs in many cultures. But what is it? Doppelganger is German for double walker, and it refers to meeting an exact copy of yourself. Sure, sometimes people use the word loosely to mean someone similar to themselves, but a real doppelganger is your exact replica. And usually when that happens, it's bad news. One of the most famous examples was when Abraham Lincoln reported seeing two reflections of himself in the mirror, with one appearing pale and ghostly. Understandably, Lincoln was a bit weirded out by this and took it as a bad omen, but his wife tried to comfort him.
I'm sure it's nothing, dear. It probably means you're going to be elected for a second term.
Yes, it must be that. She got that pretty wrong though, because not long after, he was assassinated, making it even more spooky because his premonition actually came true. Another renowned example was when poet Percy Bysshe Shelley met his doppelganger and then drowned soon after. It's hard to imagine any scientific explanation for this kind of thing. Some might point to more facial recognition errors in the brain or false memories where you remember something that didn't actually happen. But others point to possibilities like the multiverse theory, suggesting that doppelgangers are other versions of ourselves momentarily stepping from another universe into ours. In any case, if you see someone who looks a bit like you, you're probably better off making yourself scarce. Number 4, false awakening. At least if you see a doppelganger, you can quickly head off in the other direction. But here's a glitch you can't do anything about because it happens while you're asleep. False awakening is where we think we wake up and start going about our day, only to then realize we're still dreaming. When this happens, at first, everything seems normal. But then you start to notice things are off and, well, glitchy. And the next thing you know, you're back in your dream state, fast asleep again. Sometimes you can even get caught in a loop where you realize you're dreaming, wake up from your dream, and then realize you're actually still dreaming after all. This can sometimes happen several times, giving you layers of false awakenings, and one man even reported going through this process 7 times. And then, the problem is that you start second-guessing reality itself. Is it just a brain malfunction? So one part thinks you're still in REM sleep while another thinks you're awake? Maybe. Or maybe it's just another reality glitch giving us a glimpse of the truth, that we're actually living in a simulation within a simulation within a simulation. Number 3. Sleep paralysis. False awakenings are disconcerting, but this next one is downright terrifying. If you've ever experienced it, you'll know it's abject horror. And if you haven't, well, just keep your fingers crossed you never do. One night you'll be fast asleep, and then suddenly you'll wake up, but when you try to roll over to get back to dreamland, you'll realize you can't move. You try to move your arms, you try to kick with your legs, you try to sit up, you might even try to cry out, but no, your entire body is paralyzed. But worse, this paralysis is accompanied by a deep sense of dread, as if there's some kind of evil presence nearby that means you harm. The sense of terror is horrifying, but no matter what you do, you won't be able to move a muscle, and all you can do is lie there helplessly with a feeling that something awful is about to happen. Fortunately, the sensation usually passes within a minute or two, and released from your paralysis, you can finally go back to sleep. But what just happened? Well, sleep scientists say that while you're in REM sleep, your body goes into a state of paralysis to stop you thrashing about as you dream. And sometimes you wake up from REM sleep without your body getting the message that it doesn't need to stay paralyzed anymore. That makes sense. But why the feeling of dread and the sense that a malevolent being is watching over you? And why does almost everybody report this same sensation whenever sleep paralysis occurs? Could it be that some kind of demonic presence is responsible for the paralysis, and that scientists' explanations are wide off the mark? Number 2. The Mandela Effect. Picture the guy from the Monopoly board game, and what do you see? A jovial character in a black jacket with a mustache, wearing a top hat and a monocle, right? Except no, because he never had a monocle. And this makes him one of the most famous examples of the so-called Mandela Effect, where hundreds or even thousands of people share the same false memory. The phenomenon is named after Nelson Mandela because large numbers of people swear they remembered him dying in a South African prison, despite the fact he was eventually released, going on to become the first president of post-apartheid South Africa, and dying at the ripe old age of 95. So what could the scientific explanation be? How can thousands of people, or perhaps millions in the case of Nelson Mandela, share the same false memory? Most rational explanations just don't seem to cut it. For example, could it be that one person misremembered the fact and then the idea spread from there? But that wouldn't account for Mr. Monopoly's monocle, because who goes around talking about that? There are loads of other examples too. Thousands of people remember the Fruit of the Loom logo containing a horn of plenty, but it never did. And large numbers of people also clearly remember Darth Vader saying,
"Luke, I am your father,"
in Empire Strikes Back, when the actual words were,
"No, I am your father."
Go and check it if you don't believe it. Another more troubling possibility is that these are more examples of someone tampering with reality, so maybe these things were once true, but they got changed and people still remember how they were before. Scary, huh? Number 1. Synchronicity. And now perhaps the weirdest of them all, synchronicity, which is a fancy way of saying coincidences that are too much to accept. Have you ever found yourself thinking of a friend you haven't spoken to for 10 years only for them to phone you the next day? Or perhaps you're walking down the street listening to music only to see the lyrics of the song you've got on written on the t-shirt of someone walking the other way. When coincidences like these are too uncanny to believe, they are examples of synchronicity. And when they occur, it's hard to think there's not more going on than we understand. Sure, you can put it down to your brain trying to find patterns in random events, and yes, that does happen. But sometimes there has to be more to it than that. Take this for example. In 1838, Edgar Allan Poe wrote a story about a shipwreck where the survivors ended up eating a cabin boy named Richard Parker. Weird story, right? But not anywhere near as freaky as the fact that 46 years later, in 1884, there was a real-life shipwreck and the survivors really did eat the cabin boy. And what was the cabin boy's name? Yep, you guessed it. Richard Parker. Think about it. How many people end up getting shipwrecked and eating their cabin boy? A handful in the whole of history? And out of all the combinations of names Poe could have used, what are the chances of him choosing exactly the same name as the cabin boy who would meet the same fate nearly half a century later? Is it down to quantum entanglement, where two quantum particles become entangled and react to each other even at vast distances? Or maybe it's proof that time isn't linear, and the order of events somehow got mixed up. Or again, is it just a glitch in reality, or the simulated world we're living in, that's making stuff happen in the wrong order? You decide. Have you ever experienced any of these glitches yourself? And how do you account for them? Do you prefer to comfort yourself with science, or are you convinced there's far more going on than we really understand? We're pretty sure you've got your own view, so why not let us know in the comments section below? And while you're at it, drop us a like and a follow to help us keep creating more content like this.